very grateful to be with you this evening. I bring apologies of my colleague, Dr. Cavella, who was due to be with me, but unfortunately was called away at short notice. And I have immense thanks to Dr. Mohammad Reza Sabati, who is stepped in at short notice in order to help field some of the complicated questions that I'm sure are going to come along towards the end of this evening. Chris Tumazu, our CEO and co-founder, is a multi-award-winning inventor, innovator and tech entrepreneur with over 80 granted patents in the field of consumer healthcare and microchip technology. He's London's first Regius Professor of Engineering and founder of the Imperial College Institute of Biomedical Engineering. Chris's co-founder, Maria Cavallo, is a published biologist, geneticist and leukemia researcher. Maria's team of geneticists, biologists, dietitians and deep learning software engineers created the world's first database to map genetic traits to individual food, drink and skincare product ingredients, opening up a new era of DNA personalized shopping. And this really formed that basis for the technology as it stands. The impetus behind DnaNudge is to make the frontiers of science accessible to everyone. Our wider team consists of research scientists and engineers at the cutting edge of their fields, working on ways to take processes that have been restricted to laboratories and hospitals so that they're not only allowing the science to be conducted anywhere in the world, but to also allow anyone to run the test. Most importantly, our technology allows those tested to use the data to nudge their everyday decisions and so make a difference to their lifestyle and health. The core technology of Nudge takes the polymerase chain reaction, the PCR process that we heard so much about through COVID, that makes millions of copies of a DNA sample and reads particular strands to identify traits. And this is performed on our very clever kit. So on the video that you're seeing, it's a breakdown of all the components that are used in our technology. It starts off with the NudgeBox. And I'm not sure how big my screen is on here, but this is the NudgeBox. Now, the NudgeBox is the facilitator of the technology. In squeezing Wi-Fi, Bluetooth-enabled lab equipment into the size of a shoebox, it's no mean feat, and unfortunately would take up a dedicated session of its own to go into the process of miniaturization. But this little box is capable of running optimized processes dependent upon what part of the DNA code we want to look at. The device reads the barcode on the cartridge and then proceeds to run the corresponding protocol of thermocycles and other processes to the cartridge before it delivers the analysis to the cloud, where algorithms then process the inputs and deliver the results to the customer or the medical professional, depending on the test being run. Now, the NudgeBox is a completely sealed unit, and as such, it's capable of running different flavors of cartridges in quick succession. They sit inside the box and are largely a completely contained unit. There are 605 components from over 50 suppliers located globally. You can see the NudgeBox, how it fits together. The cartridge holds all of the chemicals and the reagents, as well as the genetic sample from the patient or the customer. It really is a lab on a little cartridge, and it provides a complete PCR process, optimized whether you're running a COVID sample on a cartridge such as this, or a flu sample on a cartridge such as this, or indeed, flu, or indeed a consumer health, such as our nutrition or skincare cartridges. I think that I'll pause the video because I think it'll be quite useful to take a look at some of the components. So we'll just let it zoom in a little further, and you can see that where the swab is inserted. I'll just wait for a key moment. So this is the makeup of the cartridge, and I'll pause it here because I think this captures the inner workings really effectively and shows the two main parts that will talk about a little bit about today. And the first is the black part. That's the amplification unit. You'll probably hear me reference it as the AU throughout today. This is a plastic part with two membranes and some molecular mesh. Each of those little dots that you see on the screen is spotted with a buffer, and that's done using a non-contact piezo dispensing method. There are 72 of these wells, and each of them holds a primer that detects a particular signal, which is used for genetic analysis. The way that I've always heard this described is that if you imagine that each one of those buffers in the well is a particular bait that has been chosen to attract and capture only one type of fish. And so by choosing our reagents effectively, we can detect a range of genetic traits that we can then examine through the NudgeBox. The second part of the cartridge is the sample preparation kit, or the SPK, and that's this white section that you see towards the back. Now, there are 22 tooled components within this section, and you can see here that there are a number of wells. Each one of those wells holds a different chemical that is used to stimulate the reaction. Our cartridge configuration holds 3 liquid buffers and 1 freeze-dried or lyophilized reagent, which is used during the process to prepare the sample for the PCR process. Let's continue playing. One of the significant benefits of the cartridge is that regardless of whether it's a COVID cartridge, a flu cartridge, a cosmetic cartridge, or a skincare cartridge, or a nutrition cartridge, the components are largely the same. It's the reagents that vary, which makes for a fairly standard production process, but a very different scientific process. The test flow, regardless of the cartridge, starts with a swab. I think we're all fairly familiar after COVID-19 of the horrors of swabbing, and so we like to use a mouth swab wherever possible. This is put into the mouth and the cheek, and it collects skin cells, which are then inserted into the DNA cartridge. The cap is taken out of the back, and it's inserted into the small reservoir there. The DNA cartridge barcode is then scanned and placed into the NudgeBox. The NudgeBox then runs for a period of time, depending on the test that's being conducted. And then it uploads the test data as well as the cartridge barcode to the DnaNudge cloud. That's where the analysis is performed. The test data, the DNA-based product recommendations are then sent to, in the case of a nutrition cartridge, to the customer's iPhone or their band, or in the case of a medical test, it's sent to the medical professional for the next stages. It's a very consolidated process, a very concise process, and it really relies on the power of the cloud and computational learning in order to drive the test and make it as efficient as it can be. Now, as I said before, there are multiple applications and opportunities for the technology. We want to talk today about 2 that are particularly developed and fed directly to our winning the MacRobert Award in 2021. The first is nutrition. And this is one that is close to the hearts of all of us at DnaNudge. We all know that the best diet is the diet you don't know you're having. And that's the concept of nudge. It gives people more choices within their same behavior. The genetic predispositions are stored on the customer's wearable or in their app, and this is then compared with a database of ingredients with items available to buy from shops, national cafes, and other locations to nudge the consumer to choose the best product for their DNA. So, for example, I'm being nudged through salt sensitivity. So when I use my DnaNudge, it directs me, for example, to not choose dry roasted peanuts because their salt content is slightly higher than those of salted peanuts. And just by that simple change, I can save over 1 kilo of salt from entering into my blood. over the course of a year. And that's a fantastic change. I can still eat peanuts. I'm just choosing to use those that are slightly better for me. And I think that's what really makes DnaNudge slightly different. It provides the tools to allow people to make actions based on their DNA. We have reports to show sensitivity and information about the different areas that are examined through the DnaNudge test. There's NudgeBox, which allows users to compare their similarity with other people. So you can share the information with your friends and talk about similarities. With NudgeShare, it makes the app usable with families and shared users, so that when I'm shopping for my kids, I can take into account their dispositions as well. Recommendations is absolutely vital in this, and it shows other options within the same category. My dry roasted peanuts aren't going to be recommended to be swapped with a piece of fruit or something unrelated. It will pull something from the same category in order to recommend a healthier option. And finally, activity is assessed to ensure that this is taken into account when I'm making choices. My peanuts might be green in a normal course of events, but if I've been sitting at my desk all day long, perhaps they've turned amber or red to suggest that I need to maybe perform some actions before eating. The results of nudges in health and well-being is fantastic. In a trial comparing purchase behavior prior to using DnaNudge versus with Nudge, we found that green recommended choices, those that work best with your DNA, increased by 25%. Green healthy choices, so just generally improved choices in food, increased by 28%. We found that there were over 95% of good swaps when the customer actively changed their final purchase item for something which is healthier. And especially, and notable within this current climate, we found that there was no overall increase in the spend of the user. Now, through COVID, comorbidities have become front and center as vital in managing long-term health of nations. DnaNudge really provides a tool that allows governments and citizens to act together in improving lifestyle choices that then drive improved health. And that takes me really, really nicely onto the next application and a major catalyst in the recent progress of DnaNudge. Our medical applications came out of the needs of COVID and have driven the huge need for optimization of production, supply, and tech transfer to a mass production environment. While the NHS took a significant share of cartridges and in order to support national testing, we also supported COVID testing to a number of industries, and we were particularly close to the performing arts, who we supported by providing tests to the artists to allow rehearsals and performances as life opened up again.
My name's Simon Rattle, Music Director of the London Symphony Orchestra, and I'm here to thank DnaNudge, who have worked with us over these last really difficult weeks and have the same kind of can-do attitude as the London Symphony Orchestra. We've made a partnership together, so it's been possible to test the entire orchestra. It's done in such a warm, friendly and easy way. And I was the very last one at the end of 2 days yesterday, and everybody working with DnaNudge was so warm, and they said also what a lovely group of people this orchestra is. So they're absolutely on my Christmas list every time, because that's true. Thank you so much. Let's be very clear about this. Without the testing, the orchestra would not be able to return to work safely. We are already very distanced and very careful, but we would not be able to do what we can do without this. Would not only legally, but also for everybody's confidence to be together and playing. So this is terribly important. And over these last months, I've had a few tests. Of course, now they are much more straightforward. They no longer take out parts of your brain. It's actually very easy and comfortable to do. And this makes a real difference to us because we now have the confidence to come and work together. And this will be something ongoing into the future as we gradually encourage our audiences that, yeah, it is safe to come and hear orchestras. This will be part of our journey in the next couple of years.
What made the arts COVID testing so successful was the ability to conduct testing on site and to deliver very fast results without moving the samples to a laboratory, without being caught in the huge rush of sampling as the world opened up. And so it was an incredibly enjoyable to be able to help the arts return to normal. The manufacturing of our NudgeBox and our cartridges needed to happen quickly. We moved towards 2 contract manufacturing partners to help with both the cartridge and the NudgeBox. In Ireland, we commissioned Jabil to be our manufacturing partner to support a significantly steep ramp up in the manufacture of the cartridge. While the NudgeBox we gave to an electronics company based in the States, but with their plant in the Netherlands. The NudgeBox production was located in a tech center within Netherlands, and it fit perfectly within the established operation. With the Netherlands being particularly impacted by COVID, the project was received incredibly well, with the production team winning awards and the project being adopted by the local government as it supported a huge drive in the community apprenticeship programs. Over 4,000 NudgeBoxes were manufactured within 6 months. To meet the urgent requirements, we phased our cartridge production capabilities to balance speed, outputs, and flexibility. The scale-up of manufacture from nothing is a significant task, especially as we were finalizing the evolution of the COVID cartridge at the same time. We took the decision very early to utilize single-pass manual production for the first production line, providing the ability to refine production processes and enhance the supply chain. At the same time, tooling was begun for multi-up manual production lines, and equipment orders were also placed for customized semi-automated production. While the maximum production outputs achieved with automated production, the lead time, the cost, the ultimate flexibility of the system made it fairly unappetizing at the beginning of the journey, but it was always the end objective as it provides a level of care and contamination mitigation that's significantly more difficult to maintain in a manual process. While we were able to quickly adapt the cartridge to meet COVID testing standards and supply into the NHS, the reality is that it really wasn't an easy task. There were a large number of issues that affected our ability to transfer the technology to mass production, as well as to ensure the high quality and traceability expected of a medical product. We knew that supply issues were going to be a problem. And so while there were very few surprises, I think that we did see largely supply issues across our both components and also equipment. We found that equipment lead times increased significantly than we expected and than we were initially quoted when we were initiating the project, just due to the huge rush in procurement of medical equipment due to COVID. Likewise, we found a huge cost to investment required some really careful budgeting for the cash flow. Because ultimately we were building facilities and manufacturing capabilities before selling the cartridges. Our upstream capacity issues did cause us some issues, and reagent supply was a very big issue. While we never stopped production, we did find that during the height of the pandemic, the worldwide requirement for reagents, so those chemicals for analysis of samples, it outstripped the capacity to synthesize. And so there were times where we fed production lines daily rather than be able to wait for bulk shipments. Likewise, we found that virgin plastics were in short supply for periods in 2020, and so we needed to massage the production to keep things moving. The tech transfer was planned to include the use of biodot machines to spot the reagents to the amplification chip, so to the little black section there. However, it became very apparent early in the process that while precise for a small-scale operation with highly skilled prototyping engineers operating the equipment, these didn't scale as well within the semi-skilled manufacturing environment that we were working in. We implemented an immediate RFI to identify alternative spotting processes and identified the best cost option was to outsource the spotting and the associated quality control. And in parallel, we began the work to bring high volume piezo spotting in-house. The component section have caused us probably the most significant concern within the ramp up of production of the cartridge. Early during the NudgeBox production, we identified that a large number of our valves that were manufactured in the USA had been classified as essential to their COVID response, and so were restricted from export. This is when having Benchmark as our manufacturing partner really came into its own. They, being a large American corporation, they were able to do some work with their corporate offices in North America, and we secured stocks and as well as modifying our procurement process to increase safety stocks. We also identified that a critical hydrophobic mesh that was central to the cartridge manufacture had been discontinued. This wasn't really a problem when we were making a consumer cartridge, as the stock was sufficient for the long-term forecast. However, with the volumes that were required to support the NHS pandemic response, the volumes were just so much higher. And so we had to immediately go out to market and purchase every square inch of this hydrophobic mesh from around the world, while at the same time launching urgent trials to integrate a new material into the production process. This worked. We found a new mesh, and the quantity that we purchased was just about the right amount. So it was cutting it very fine there. But in this way, despite the setbacks, we were able to create a scalable solution that really did make a difference. Now, we are still manufacturing using mostly manual processes, albeit in a multi-up environment whereby multiple components are processed during a single production pass. I thought it'd be quite interesting to show our manufacturing facilities so you can see how they come together. Now, this is a manual production line, which we're still using at this time, albeit with a multi-up environment. So the AU that you see here is the complicated part. And from the transfer of the spotting, each of those 72 wells needs to be baited with the right reagents. The membranes need to perform within very tight tolerances, and also they have to be workable in an industrial environment, so they have a perfect seal. And you can see these stages of sealing the membranes to the AU, and then going through various QC processes in order to make sure that it is an appropriate seal. You can see here a single unit leak test to ensure that the pressure is correct. So as it goes through, the sample preparation kit revolves around the addition of particular reagents and buffers at key stages of the process. The insertion of the desiccant and the special mix of freeze-dried buffers here is followed by sealing the reservoirs and testing it to ensure that there are no leaks prior to adding the 3 liquid buffers. So these liquid buffers are inserted at this stage, and when the cartridge is in use, these reagents will be washed over the swab and to take the genetic material from it, and then mixed prior to being pushed over the 72 wells of the amplification unit, which then allow the PCR process to occur. These small O-rings provide the seals between the chambers that transfer the liquids. The cone that's just being put on the press here rotates, and the NudgeBox applies pressure to allow the fluid to be pushed into different areas. And then the ring here seals the units together while still allowing the central core of the cartridge to be able to rotate. Most importantly in the manual process has been the need for high care internal quality checks and process that makes a reliable cartridge every time. These are ultimately medical devices, and so the devices need to conform to the high standard, and we need to ensure that they have the ability to provide a result with the necessary sensitivity and specificity that is allows for someone to know if they have COVID or not. And that's so important within this traceability function as the units are packaged. The barcode allows every single cartridge to be tied to its individual components, so there is full traceability within the system. Now, many of the risks and the inefficiencies are removed as we move to a robotic production line, and that's been the very exciting time that we've had over the last month or so, where we've been able to move from a manual production to the robotic lines. Now, we've just completed the installation and are currently going through qualification of the semi-automated production line. This aerial view is obviously pre-factory release, but I think it shows quite nicely the modules that go towards producing the cartridges. This machine doesn't assemble the AU. The change in the membrane that I spoke about earlier delayed the validation. Therefore, it's still undergoing factory assessments prior, but we're expecting it within the next 2 months. The assembly of the SPK that's being shown here is very comparable to the manual process we just saw. These are those small O-rings that form the seals between the valves. Whereas instead of using tweezers, we now have 3 robotic spider arms that place the O-rings precisely prior to the assembly of the cone. See the O-rings in place as it moves through. And then this robotic arm places the cone in place. These are those small clip rings that hold the cone in place. And as we move to the next stage, you can see the new robotic press that clamps it into place. As these move through, they then get hit an automated foil sealing and buffer filling station before they finally go to a leak test, which again is fully automatic and pressurizes the cartridge in order to identify if there are any concerns, any problems, any QC fails prior to the cartridge moving to the end of the line for lid application and packing. So I think as we look back as to where we've been, certainly since the awarding of the MacRobert Award, we've seen huge progress in the formalization of the processes. And as we look forward, we're excited about new markets. We're in active conversations with Australia, the United States, and other European countries in order to move DnaNudge into these areas from both a medical point of view, but also for the consumer health. Secondly, the new products are being developed, both in the consumer health side, but also in the medical areas, to really build upon the fact that we have a decentralized testing environment that is able to help patients, whether they're close to a specialist unit or not. And then finally, we're always looking for new applications. Now, for the last 2 years, we've been heavily focused in hospitals, but as we move forward, we are taking the nudge more into the community. So placing nudge boxes within shops to aid consumer testing or bespoke medical testing. The nudge box is fully portable, and so putting it into mobile units and away from the normal infrastructure. And finally, we found that testings within schools are incredibly beneficial. And so these are all areas that we're developing as we go forward, and we're very excited about what the future might bring.